Welcome back to Refit and Sail. My name's George and I'm here in the Azores, and in this episode we're going to do some actual sailing. Welcome back. First of all, let me introduce my very good friend Richard Clark. Say hello. Hi. Richard.
Hello everyone.
So we are sailing two-handed from here in Ponta Delgada on San Miguel back to the UK over the next few days. The wind is looking pretty decent, a bit light at times, so we've got plenty of diesel, but hopefully if we can get north into the weather that we want, we should have some nice breeze on our beam or after the beam all the way back to the UK. I'll update you on the weather in a little while, but first of all we need to start the engine and get underway.
As before, I'm using Predict Wind for my weather as we go along, using my Iridium Go to download it as we are travelling northeast up to the UK. So the Azores is down at the bottom left of the chart or map here, and the UK is up in the top right up there. As you can see, there's not exactly a lot of wind at the moment around the Azores, so that's Sunday at 6 o'clock, so that's just about now. But the plan is to head north as we are under engine, and then sometime Monday going into Tuesday we'll pick up those nice southwesterlies that are there, and all the models agree that those are going to fill in if we go north and find them. So after that we should be able to pop that big kite up and then sail along quite nicely in 10-15 knots breeze. It goes onto the beam and then it slightly goes forward of the beam, so we should have a nice sailing angle to make pretty decent progress over the following few days into Friday. Now it goes light again for a while there, but to be honest with you, that's a few days off now, so I think we'll be keeping an eye on the weather just to see if we need to go any further north or whether we want to go back closer to the rum line. So these things always do progress as you sail, and you just need to adjust your plans accordingly. At the moment we are going to be sailing quite a lot more miles than doing the rum line, which is the direct route, but it does mean we can switch the engine off and catch that nice breeze, which theoretically, if this model rings true, we'll be taking that breeze all the way back to the UK, and by the looks of it we'll be running past the Scillies, so perhaps we'll even drop in there for a night or two.
Here's the end of the island. We decided to motor east along the southern end of the island just because both Richard and I came along here when we did the Azores and back race back in 2011, and so we've been reminiscing a little bit and looking at the geography, and it's very pretty up this end. It's very high, as you can see. It's now Monday morning. As you can probably hear, the engine is again on, which is slightly annoying, but it was to be expected given the weather forecast. In fact, we were quite lucky last night. I came on watch at 11 o'clock, and by 11:30 the wind had filled into about 7 knots. So I was able to hoist the main, pull out the Genoa and switch the engine off, and it slowly built up to about 10 knots overnight. But unfortunately by 6 this morning it was all going a bit soft and the sails were flapping and the boat speed was down to 2.5 knots. So decided to put the engine back on at that stage. We've been motor sailing since then. It's now 8 o'clock in the morning. But the sun's coming out, as you can probably see. It's becoming nice and bright. I'm hoping it isn't quite as hot as yesterday. It was very, very warm on the boat yesterday when we were motoring along with no wind and blazing sun. We did have one slight issue. When I went to start the engine at 6 o'clock this morning, it didn't want to go on the engine start battery, and I'm not entirely sure why that is. I need to go and investigate, because the battery was showing good voltage, showing 12.75 volts, and the engine had been running previously and quite recently, so it was a fully charged battery as far as I can tell. So I'm hoping maybe something has vibrated loose, and I've got a slightly poor connection on the engine start battery. It started absolutely fine on the button when I switched over to using the domestic bank to start the engine. No issues at all with the engine starting on that. It was just the engine start battery. So the wind is not expected really to fill in today, but it might even be that I just drift along for half an hour while I look at the engine, as it's nice and calm, so it's easy to do it now without the boat bouncing around. But we shall see. Time for a cup of tea. If you're wondering what sort of watch system we're doing, we're two-handed, so it obviously has to alternate between us. It's very much like single-handed sailing this, apart from you get sleep. Well, you get sleep for more than half an hour at least, so that's quite nice. We've decided to do a simple 4 on 4 off watch system because that hopefully will work for us reasonably well. We're going to give it a couple of days and see how we settle into that. The killer is the kind of 2 to 4 o'clock in the morning period when your natural body clock's at its lowest ebb, so we've decided to split the difference on that. So we do a watch change at 0300, so I do the 4 hours leading up to 0300, and then Richard takes over at 03 and takes it on to 7 o'clock in the morning. It's now Monday evening, and it's been a fairly dull day, to be fair. We did just short of 120 miles in our first 24 hours of the passage, which is more than I expected, to be fair, because we've been motoring or sailing fairly slowly when the wind has allowed. The engine's been on and off a few times, but it's mostly been on. I haven't totally resolved, but I have looked into the engine starting issue. I had a look at some of the cables onto the engine and onto the battery. A couple of the connections onto the battery weren't brilliant, so I have remade them, but it hasn't solved the issue. The engine still won't start on the engine start battery, so we're having to rely on using the house bank and linking that to the engine start battery. Forecast is still suggesting that the wind will start filling in tomorrow morning and through the day, which will be really nice because it's going to be good to get the engine off. I stuck one of the 20-litre cans into the fuel tank just to keep it topped up, so we're not short of fuel, we've got tons of fuel, but it's going to be nice to have the noise of the engine off. It's now Tuesday morning, it's about 9:15. I came up at 7 and started my watch. Richard's asleep down below, and there's not really a lot to do, to be fair. I've been finding jobs. I've put another 20 litres of fuel from the cans on deck into the tank just to keep the tank topped up. That's partly because the fuel's on the starboard side, and when the wind fills in, it's going to be filling in from the port side, so there's no point in having the weight of fuel on deck on the starboard side. So Richard was quite keen to try a bit of fishing, so I have got my hand line out, but this little fishy lure thing here has so far been unsuccessful. In fact, if I had to rely on my fishing skills, I'd be extremely hungry because I've never caught a thing. Richard thinks that's because I've been sailing too fast, which is entirely possible because when I've been doing it, it's been on the Atlantic crossing last time, and we were pushing along really quite quickly. But he also suggests one of these little chaps, these little squiddy things. So this doesn't have a hook on it, so I have removed a hook from one of my other fishy things, and I've got some fishing line, so I'm going to see if I can attach that into that somehow and have a long line coming off, which I can attach onto my fishing line. Now, if you were a fish, would you fancy eating that? I think that looks really tasty. It's now about 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Tuesday. I think it's Tuesday, and we finally are sailing without the engine on. The wind just picked up enough that we've got the big kite up and full main, and it's very, very nice not having to listen to the engine anymore. The wind should now slowly build and come forward on us, but we are all set up just to harden up on the kite slightly as it comes forward and hopefully keep flying it for as long as possible. There we go, Richard concentrating hard on the spinnaker trim. Or are you just contemplating life?
Exactly. I think we're not that far off the track, really.
No, we are indeed pointing kind of in the right direction, which is nice. made out of half-ounce material, this spinnaker, so it flies even in fairly light conditions, which is nice. On the flip side, when it pipes up a bit, we need to take it down because it's not really designed for stronger winds.
The engine appreciates it as well.
I think the engine is enjoying a nice rest. Well, the sun is now setting on another nice day. Just had a chat with a very pleasant Frenchman. There's a mini race, so a mini is a class of boat, mini 650. 77 or 72 boats, I think he said, are racing from France down to the Azores and back as part of their qualification for the Mini Transat, the next edition of that. So as we passed a few of them, there will definitely be a few more probably to keep an eye out for overnight and through tomorrow. But we've still got the kite up, as you can see. So we're going along very nicely. We've got about 8 knots of breeze and a flat sea, and it's a very, very pleasant way to travel this. Hopefully the kite will be up like this all night, and then I'm expecting tomorrow the wind may increase a little bit more and go forward a little bit more, but we shall see. Anyway, I should be in bed because Richard is on watch, and I'll be back up at 11 o'clock. It's now Wednesday morning and the sun has started coming out, which is rather nice because I woke up at 6:30 and it was pouring with rain and misty and pretty horrible. Flew the kite all night, so we had the big white one up, and the wind was slowly veering round, so it was becoming increasingly tight with the spinnaker. By 8 o'clock I had to make the decision to take the very wet spinnaker down, which I don't really like doing because you've got to put it somewhere. But we dropped the kite because we were only able to make a course of around 110, 115, which effectively means we were sailing south rather than north. So took the kite down, so we got a wet kite unfortunately, but now the sun is out, I'm hoping I can spread it out maybe a bit in the cockpit and dry it out a bit so we don't have too much wet down below. Making progress now, we're back on course. We're effectively close hauled now. As you can see, we're under full Genoa. I've got one tuck in the main because at one stage it piped up to about 18, 19 knots apparent, which is only about 12, 14 true. But just for the sake of making life easy, I stuck one reef in the mainsail, and we're under full Genoa. The sea's lovely and flat, so we're making pretty nice progress. It's actually a rather nice day now the sun is out. That means the batteries will hopefully charge up with a bit of solar and a bit of wind. It's now later on Wednesday, it's about 6 o'clock, and here is the view from the cockpit. We did have beautiful sunshine earlier, and unfortunately it's clouded back over again a little bit, but the wind has moved aft, so we've been able to free the sheets off a little bit on the main and the Genoa. Not a sausage around, no ships at all. We had some dolphins a little bit earlier playing in the bow, which was always good to see, but more exciting, we saw some whales off in the distance. They were about probably 100 metres away. Could see the whales blowing and breathing out the tops of their heads, or whatever it is that they blow out of their blowholes. Quite pleased I didn't get any closer. I'm not very keen on having whales very close to the boat, but it was really nice to see. I'm not sure how many it was. It was definitely more than one, possibly 2 or 3 altogether. So that was lovely. Dinner is about to be served. Now we're being extremely lazy on dinner, and I'll take you down below and show you what we're going to have. Should really be saving them for bad weather, but for dinner tonight we have freeze-dried expedition foods, and we're having chili con carne, normally used by racing sailors when sailing offshore because they're very lightweight, and if you have a water maker you just make the water, boil it up, chuck it in, wait 10 minutes and nosh it off, and they're actually tastier than you might think. I had them previously when I've been doing some racing, and great for bad weather because you just chuck water in, as I said. And they come in different sizes. I think you can get small, medium and large depending on how many calories you need to get into your body. And that's dinner tonight. We're going to make it posh by putting it into a bowl, but you can eat them straight out the packet. There's my chili con carne with rice. Just need to chuck a spoon in there and away we go. How's your dinner, Richard?
It's excellent, George, and I'd like to send my compliments to the chef this evening, if I may.
Rightio. I'll send an email to Expeditions.
The presentation is excellent.
I think what makes it is putting it in a bowl. It's clearly the secret ingredient.
I think you're right, mate. Very nice.
It's now Thursday morning, and here's the view from the cockpit looking aft. As you can see, I've got my fishing line out. See if I can catch something for dinner. Not been successful so far. Sailing along, wind on the beam, still got one reef in the mainsail up there, full Genoa at the moment. Times the wind pipes up a bit and I consider putting a few rolls in the Genoa, but it hasn't really stayed windy long enough. As soon as I start thinking about it, the wind drops back down to a more manageable wind strength. It was a pretty quiet night, to be fair. The sea has built up a little bit, so it was a bit more rolly. Certainly sleeping for myself in the back cabin and Richard in the forward cabin, it became a little bit less comfortable. So Richard's having a snooze now in the centre of the boat. So that is, you certainly feel a lot less movement if you're in the centre of the boat than you do at the ends. It's also got markedly cooler. You can see I've managed to pull one of my winter fleeces out because as we've come north, the air and the sea temperature is dropping. Just 2 days ago I was walking around on deck in my pants basically, and now I'm having to wear considerably more than that. I'm hoping it warms up a bit once the sun comes out because it's been very grey this morning. You can still see, if I turn you around this way, it's pretty grey in the background there, but the sun is starting to break through, which is nice, and actually it's quite needed. The batteries are now down to 65% or so. So I need to get a bit of solar input on my solar panels. Boat's going really nicely though in this breeze. We've been averaging 6 to 7 knots, and when the wind pipes up, sort of touching 8 knots, which is very pleasing considering the bottom of the boat probably isn't that clean. I haven't cleaned the bottom of the boat properly or thoroughly since it was painted, and that was when we left the UK back in August of last year, and now we're in the end of July this year. I think on a future boat I might consider copper coat because you can just scrub it and go rather than having to anti-foul. But it's a bit of a mixed blessing, copper coat, but I might talk about that in a separate refit video because this is a sailing video. Has to be said, we have been pretty lazy on the steering front. I have got the wind pilot at the back there, you can see it. I've got the servo pendulum rudder sticking up at the moment. It's got a little bit of friction in the system at the moment, so whilst it will work, I'm just using the electric pilot. So you can see that has been steering us quite nicely since we left the Azores. Got an Evolution, Raymarine Evolution pilot, which I had on a previous boat, and I've fitted loads of them to customers' boats. They're a fantastic pilot, so it really does a super job. It's currently set on the lowest of its response levels, so that reduces the amount of power it's using. Doesn't hold exactly as tight a course as it would on one of the higher levels, but for cruising along as we are, it's absolutely perfect. Anyway, that's probably enough for now. I'm going to go and make a cup of tea. The end of the day is arriving rapidly. It's been a fairly grey day all day today, unfortunately. Hardly a hint of sun. Fortunately, the wind generator has been putting some power back into the batteries, so we're okay on that for now. Just tried to do a bit of fishing without luck. The only thing that was really interested in my little squiddy fishing lure was a couple of seabirds, and having caught a seabird on a lure before and had it bite me when I released the thing, I decided to pull the line in, and Richard said I'm probably going too fast at the moment anyway, and we've been averaging 6, 7, occasionally a bit more on the boat speed today. The good thing is we did 160 miles in our last 24-hour run, which is excellent. So we're hoping for a quiet night. The wind has moderated a little bit, and the forecast for the next few days that I've downloaded is looking pretty good. The weather is going to go aft and ease overnight, but it's going to stay with us certainly for the next few days. Might end up with a kite up. Probably about 4 to 4.5 days to go to Plymouth. So that's our estimate, and there is 656 miles currently to go. It's Friday morning and there's nothing to report. Right, I'll try that again. It's Friday morning and it's been a very quiet night overnight. The wind has continued its strength. It's gone slightly forward and it's dropped in its strength slightly, so I think it's more the apparent has gone forward. The forecast is for it to go aft actually and come round a bit more behind us, but that may not happen for another 12 hours or so according to the forecast I picked up this morning. We thought we'd have a little test of the engine, so I put my multimeter directly onto the battery, or in fact it was onto the battery switch just because the battery is slightly hard to get to, and the voltages looked okay, and then left the multimeter on there whilst going through a start procedure, and the voltages dropped off a bit as you'd expect and as would be fairly normal, and the engine started on the engine start battery, so it didn't spin over particularly quickly, so we are still thinking that the battery is to fault, is getting towards the end of its life, or just a bit weak. So the answer is going to be to go and get it tested, or possibly just buy a new one when we get back to the UK. For now we're just leaving the engine to run for half an hour or so, just to give us a bit of warm water and put a bit of charge into the house bank, because as you can see it's another grey day. Well, we've made it to Saturday morning now. I didn't do another update yesterday, Friday afternoon, because to be perfectly honest with you, there wasn't a lot to say. We'd just been trundling along really nicely with some decent breeze. Overnight, the wind dropped and we did choose to put the engine on about 03:30 because it just died off to absolutely nothing. Sails were slatting, so rolled up the Genoa, put the motor on until about 7 o'clock when I stuck my head up, came on watch, and the breeze was just starting to build a little bit, and Richard said maybe we should give your knackered old Jenica a go. So back there you can see an extremely old, very stretched, very stained asymmetric spinnaker or Jenica. I'm not sure I really can call it an asymmetric spinnaker. It's a really odd, funny shape. I suspect it's probably as old as the boat, but it is in one piece, and we did go from doing 5 knots to about 6 knots with it up. So it's definitely worth the effort of putting it up. We did put it up when we were half asleep, and it wasn't the slickest of launches. In fact, it partially went under the boat because it got trapped as we were launching it and half filled with water. So it's probably a good job I didn't video that. It wasn't our proudest moment, but in our defence, we have been a little bit sleep deprived, and so we got it up without ripping anything or damaging anything, and it's working quite nicely now. It's surprising. So if we had a proper asymmetric, we'd go even faster, I suspect. The sea is lovely and flat with a gentle breeze, but still no real sunshine. It's brightened up a little bit, but a bit of sunshine would be nice. We have seen our first ship earlier on this morning. It's the first life outside of this boat, human life at least, for quite a few days.
So we've downloaded the weather again this morning, and here you can see where we are in the bottom left of the screen, and top right is the West Country of the UK. And going forward, if I stick it on ECMWF to start with, it does show a bit of a wind hole Sunday going into Monday, you can see there. So the routing suggesting we go quite a long way north. The routing is also set to take us on the fastest possible route, and that probably assumes that you've got a fairly light boat that's been sailed at 100%. So we've not got a fairly light boat, and we're definitely not sailing at 100%. So I'm inclined to sail up a bit north of the Rum line, possibly up to where the black line is suggesting on the route here. Problem we've got at the moment is if we click on to GFS, which is the other model I've downloaded, that shows a much larger area of no wind. And because the two models disagree at the moment on exactly how much wind there's going to be, it doesn't give a great deal of confidence in either model. So I don't really want to go a long way north because it could be wrong. I don't want to do the run line because that could be wrong. So I'm going to hedge my bets and go a little bit north of the run line. We'll download the weather tomorrow again and see how things are progressing and see if there's a bit more agreement between those two models. At least the models both agree that come Monday that breeze is going to fill in and we'll get a nice run in all the way to arrive sometime on Tuesday.
This really is an old sail, but it's working surprisingly well. Got a funny bulge up there. So it's later on Saturday and Rich has just told me the spinnaker reminds him of the film Waterworld because all the people live on sort of scrappy barges with bits of knackered old sailcloth over them to protect them from the sun, and the spinnaker does look a bit like it has been used and abused in its time, but it's still up, and it's actually stood up to about 18 plus knots of breeze at one stage today without shredding, so it's doing quite well. The wind has slowly moved aft a bit and it's almost a bit too far aft at times for it, but we will continue because we're pushing along quite nicely, anything from kind of 5 to 7 knots depending on how strong the wind is. Dinner's going to be some chili and rice, so looking forward to that. The sun has been out, which has been absolutely lovely after about 3 days of greyness, so the batteries have been sucking up all that free solar power and we're looking good. As you can see, we have put the symmetrical kite up. This is the smaller of the two kites I've got. We were finding that as we were sailing deeper, the asymmetric, unsurprisingly, was starting to collapse because it was sitting behind the main, just wasn't getting out into the breeze. So rather than have a problem overnight with us sailing deep and it flapping around, it was easier just to swap it over now. And we picked up quite a bit of speed, actually. We've been pushing 8.5 knots at times in the gusts, which has been very nice. And hopefully we'll have a pretty decent night with it up. The wind is going to ease into tomorrow and we might end up even having to put the motor on for a while. So, but this is a much better and more comfortable way to sail the boat, and it's faster, so that's always good. It is Sunday morning about 9 o'clock and here is the view from the cockpit. It's all very quiet, the sea state is pretty good. And over there just behind my ensign, that's the closest ship we've seen for a very long time. It's about 1.5, 1.6 miles away according to the AIS. Nothing else around. Slightly grey morning, but better than last night, which was very misty, mizzly and damp. It really wasn't all that pleasant at all. But the spinnaker up there has been doing a fantastic job all night. We've had winds from kind of 12 to 18 knots and that's been pushing us along very nicely indeed. I've just downloaded the weather and it looks like we might be in for a little bit of a lull for a few hours today and then the wind's going to pick up again from behind us. I might show you the weather in just a second. But it certainly looks like we'll have a nice trip all the way back into Plymouth. It's less than 300 miles to go now, so it's a good 2 days sailing. So we'll arrive sometime on Tuesday, I expect.
This is how it is looking for the next couple of days for our final little bit into the UK. It's going to get a little bit light today. If you can see that blue area there, I mean, there's absolutely nothing up there. There's 4 knots or so, 5 knots down there. So we've got a little light patch we're going to go through at some point this afternoon, probably through into early evening. Then it fills in again. You can see the green there. It's going to give us 11 knots up there. And then it stays with us all the way back, which is great. So we've got a nice 15 to 20 knots southwesterly to blow us all the way back up to Plymouth, which is going to be superb. The routing suggesting a slightly wiggly course. To be honest, I'm going to kind of ignore that. That's based on the fastest possible route using the wind information, but I don't trust the wind information to be accurate enough to actually follow exactly that wiggly route, because you can see it's kind of patchy, the wind there. I think the best bet is going to be for us to pretty much straight line it from here.
I started my watch at 7, but I didn't actually make it up on deck because I decided to cook Richard and I a fried egg sandwich with fried bread, which is very, very naughty but tastes so good. Sometimes you just need a bit of comfort food when you're out sailing, and kind of using up some bits and pieces that will probably need to be thrown out. There's some funny international rules when you come in and out of the UK or in and out of Europe. You're not allowed to bring certain foods in and out of the country, I believe. And eggs is almost certainly one of them. I think fresh meat and vegetables is another. So what we don't eat, we're going to have to jettison over the side, unfortunately. But there's not actually that much left now. The lockers are starting to look a little bit empty. Sunday early evening, and as you can see, we are under spinnaker, but only just. The wind has gone very, very soft now, unfortunately. Just waiting for the weather forecast to be downloadable, and then we're going to have to make a decision on whether we're going to wait for the wind to fill in, which it is forecast to do, or whether we stick the motor on and just make some progress whilst we're waiting for the wind to fill in. So it's all about when that wind is going to arrive. I'm slightly erring on the side of sticking the motor on at the moment, unless it's going to come in the next sort of 3-4 hours. At least by downloading the latest weather now, which has just been updated, it should be pretty accurate. In other news, we passed up onto the continental shelf this afternoon, so we're now in roughly 200 metres of water rather than 3,000, and that means fishing boats. There were quite a lot of fishing boats sitting just on the deep side of the continental shelf. I imagine that's because there are lots of fish that kind of come up to the surface there. It's possible we also saw some pilot whales. They were right off in the distance. If they weren't pilot whales, they were very, very, very big dolphins. It's hard to tell because they were a good kind of 100 metres plus away, but it was nice to see them briefly today. Monday morning has arrived, and as you can possibly hear, the engine is on. We're actually motoring with a bit of main up just at the moment. Engine had to go on last night after my last video, just before it got dark, and we ended up dropping all the sails just to stop them banging around because the wind just kind of disappeared on us. This morning it started coming back up a little bit, so we swung around into the wind, put the main up, and we are kind of motor sailing with the main. Richard's asleep, but he's going to wake up in the next half hour or so, and I think it's going to be time to put the kite up, switch the engine off and make our way onwards to Plymouth. It's about 160, 170 miles to go, I think, to Plymouth. We're going to skirt around the bottom of the Lizard, then head up into the bay. And I think it's going to be grey, unfortunately, for the rest of the trip by the looks of it. I've just downloaded the weather, but the wind's going to be nice and give us a nice push back to the UK. So we just chucked the kite up, and then the dolphins arrived. So if this isn't proof that dolphins like spinnakers, then I don't really know what is. We put the smaller pink one up because the wind is forecast to increase over the next 24 hours, and the big one isn't up to sort of over 20 knot gusts. And because I've come on deck, of course, the dolphins have gone away. Oh well, c'est la vie. As I said that, they came back again. Lovely animals. Someone in the comments is now going to tell me that's not a dolphin, it's a porpoise or something. It's Sunday evening now, the sun is going down, it's going to be dark in the not too distant future, but as you can see the kite is still up. We've been making fantastic progress, doing 7, 8, 9 and occasionally 10 knots all afternoon, which has been really good fun and nice to see such quick progress. Just up there is the traffic separation scheme, and beyond it the Isles of Scilly. Can't see them, but they're up there in that grey murk somewhere. Unfortunately, it has been grey all day, which is a shame, but we can't have everything. I'd rather have the wind and no sun than sun and no wind. So we're cracking on, and by tomorrow morning, when it gets light, hopefully we'll be able to see a bit of land. Here's the view from my office this morning. We are now in the English Channel. It's rather grey and murky, unfortunately. It's been grey and murky all night. Coming up the western approaches, very damp, drizzly, rainy and not very pleasant. I think that's England's way of saying welcome home. But we are here. We've got about 35 miles to go. I did a drive about an hour ago to bring us up onto the course we need to point us at Plymouth. Boat went well last night. We had really good wind, so there was around 16 to 22 knots of breeze, so we're pushing along really nicely with this smaller kite, and it made sleeping a little bit challenging. The other thing that made sleeping challenging was the amount of traffic. Out in the open ocean you sort of see one ship every 2 days, and suddenly you're confronted with many AIS targets and lights off in the distance. So I got about 2 hours sleep. I think Richard was about the same. He's now down below trying to catch up a little bit, and I think we'll sleep very soundly tonight when we get in. Here we are, just a couple of miles to go, and then we're going to have to drop the spinnaker out of the murky grey. We can see our entrance into Plymouth. We did think about flying the spinnaker all the way in, but with the wind angle it's not ideal, so we're going to drop it outside here and drop the main inside, arrange the berth for going into QAB for the night. Then I just need to sort out some custom stuff. Hopefully we'll be good. We can go and have showers and food. You enjoyed the trip, Richard?
I'll enjoy it really very much indeed when we get a beer.
Yeah. I concur. It's now Wednesday. We arrived yesterday into QAB. We actually came into the breakwater about 11 o'clock, 11:30, something like that. And that gave us a very pleasing passage time of 8 days and 22 hours, which is actually astonishingly fast considering we had a couple of days where we were motoring very slowly at about 4.5 knots. So really pleased with that. We sailed a total of 1,254 nautical miles, and you have to remember that a nautical mile is 1.15 land miles, so that's about 1,380-ish, I guess. I haven't done the exact number. We spent 77 hours under spinnaker. We spent 82.5 hours under Genoa with main, obviously, and we spent 63 hours under engine. Now, some of those hours under engine will have been when we were motor sailing with the Genoa. So sometimes when you just want to just pick up a little bit of speed. 1000 RPM on the engine when there's very light winds brings the apparent wind forward, but it means the difference between sailing at 3 knots or motor sailing at 5 to 5.5 knots. It does make a massive difference. So that wasn't just all pure motoring. Richard, as always, is excellent company. He's a fantastic sailor and is a good mate of mine. He disappeared off by train yesterday afternoon, and my partner and daughter will be rejoining the boat today. They're currently doing a little bit of shopping so that we can have a bit of a West Country cruise before we head back to the Solent. Having spent the night in QAB Marina, which is very, very convenient, I'm now moving the boat up the River Tamar. QAB is lovely. It's a great place to stop when you just need to stop and you're very, very tired, and we filled up with water and I bought some petrol for the outboard, but it's £45 a night, which is quite a lot in my book. That's for a 39 foot boat, so I'm quite happy to go and stick my hook down or maybe pick up a buoy up near Car Green up the River Tamar. We're going to spend a few days there. I've got a few more jobs to do. I need to try and resolve the engine issue, although magically, having worked the engine switch and having had another look at the battery system, the engine just started fine on the engine battery today. So I'm possibly just going to replace the engine start switch because I think there's some dirty contacts there. It's the only thing that I can think that is a problem that isn't currently visible. If you are one of the 3 or 4 people that have made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you very, very much for watching. I really appreciate it. I produce content that I think I like and other people will like. If nothing else, it's a good memory for me, but I hope other people enjoy what I produce as well. If you want to see more of this sort of stuff, press the subscribe button. It's a channel about refitting boats, it's about sailing boats, it's about solo sailing as well, and a bit of racing thrown in. So keep watching. Thanks for watching. See you next time.